Okay, in this tutorial we are going to look at tables, specifically how to create them in HTML, as well as style them with some CSS. So from the site, hopefully you have downloaded the generic site template and unzipped that. Once you take a look at it, you'll see that it's the same standard setup as all the files that we've been dealing with recently. We have an images folder where, again, all of our images would go, a home page or index.html, and a styles folder, and inside of that is a style.css file. Now in Atom, the code editor that I have chosen to work with, I'm just going to open up the index.html, and we can see that it's not really that unique or special. There's the head section and the body, and inside the body we have a div or a container with an ID of wrapper. And in between it shows us with a comment where all of our content will go. We take a quick look at our style.css. We have some width information and the margin 0 auto, which, as we saw previously, will help us center our content horizontally on the screen. So let's go ahead and remove that comment. We're going to start off by creating a simple table. So the first thing that we need to do, just to keep our code nice and tidy and organized, is indent within the div so that all of our code from here on out will be nested. And we're going to create a table tag. So by default, I've gone and written an open and a close tag because I guarantee if you don't write both at the same time, at some point in your life you're going to forget to put a close tag in, and you're going to bash your head into your desk questioning why your code isn't working. It's simply because you forgot to close a tag somewhere. So in all tables we have rows and columns. So the first thing we want to do is create a row, and again I'm just going to automatically create the closing tag. And in that row we also have, in this case, 2 columns. So in these 2 columns, what I'm actually going to do is list some bands and albums. So in the first one we'll go with Nirvana and In Utero. And rather than going and writing all of this out over and over, I'm just simply going to copy it and paste it in a couple of times here. So the next one we might go with Pink Floyd and The Wall, and the last one we'll go with Radiohead and OK Computer. So if you don't like my music choices, by all means pick something different. That's totally fine. So if we go and hit save here and just quickly switch over and check it out in our browser, it doesn't look all that special. It definitely has 2 columns. We can see that all the albums are lined up as well as the bands, and they all fit in their own rows. It's not a very special table, but that's okay. When we get there, we'll start to style it. Now, if we really want to get more complicated, we might decide that we want to put a header in here so that if someone hasn't heard of Nirvana or Pink Floyd or Radiohead, they can figure out what they're looking at. So we would come back to our table, and above all of our content here, we would just simply go in and create another row. And same as before, I'm just gonna close that. Oops. And create a, instead of a TD for our column, I'm going to create a TH, which is short for table head. And the first one is the band, next, the album. So now I have a row with 2 table head columns and 3 rows with 2 column cells. So let's just quickly save that and check it out again. So you can see that the table head has become centered and bolded by default. Again, that's the style sheet in the browser, in this case Chrome, that's taking care of that. We haven't added any design to that just yet. So we can complicate this even further, but it also makes it more understandable and more readable for screen readers and search engines. So even though the code gets a little more complex, it's actually a beneficial thing to do. So we could actually break our rows into various sections. So the heading information could go in a table head, or a TH, or T-head rather, sorry. And just to keep things clean, I'm just going to indent that. And then the actual body of the table we could put as the T body. And again, I will indent that and close it. So it doesn't do anything to the aesthetics. If I go and hit refresh here, it looks exactly the same, but it gives it a little more semantic meaning so that the screen readers and search engines can understand it better. Now, on top of the head and the body for the table, we might also want to add in a footer. So that is the T-foot. And in that table footer, we would have, again, table row, along with TD. In this one, I just want to say that the albums selected by Ryan, just so people know what they are actually looking at. So I'm just going to hit save, and we'll check that out real quick here. So, a couple of things have happened. We can see that the albums selected by Ryan take up only 1 column. I want it to span the entire width of the table because it's only 1 column of information, and I think it makes more sense to apply to everything. The other problem here is, for good practice, we should never have a missing cell, a missing TD. So if we go back to our code, what we want to actually do is, in this TD here, add in this thing called a call span equals 2. So we'll save that, and we'll quickly check it out in the browser. So now it spans the full width, and if I highlight it, you can see that it's 1 column. So call span means that it spans columns, and we said that the call span is 2, so it spans 2 columns. Now we can go ahead and start to style things up in our CSS. If we come into the style CSS file, we can add some rules. So the first is to the table. Again, with CSS, we want the little curly braces, the greater than less, or the open and the close rather. And it's good practice just to add in border collapse. That gets rid of those little gaps that we saw. So again, these little gaps here, when I hit refresh, they more or less disappear. So it just keeps things tidy and clean. For the table, we could add a font family, just like we did to our text in the previous module. I'm just going to make it Helvetica, Arial, and Sans Serif, and that with a semicolon. Now I want to apply a border to each little cell in that table. So I need to do that for the TDs and the THs. And I would do that by writing border 1px for pixel. I want it to be solid and black. And if I hit save here and refresh it, it creates the border around each TH and TD. Now the text is kind of packed in there. It's a little bit tight. So we could come back and add in some padding. Now padding is the invisible bumper around our text. Just like we have margins, paddings are on the inside of the border, margins are on the outside. So I want 4 pixels all the way around. On the top, bottom, left, and right. So just like the margin that we saw in the previous module, padding works the same way. It starts at 12 o'clock or the top and moves around to the right, bottom, and left. Now because all 4 variables are the same, we could actually just write it as padding 4 pixels. And that is just as good as before. So I'm just going to add a little comment. To remind us that both lines 13 and 14 in this example are the same. Let's hit save, and when we hit refresh, you can see that there's a little more space or padding around our text between the text and the borders there. Now to make things stand out a little more, I might decide that for the table heads that I want to make the background color, I'm going to make it a gray color. So in this case, I know that 6 3s are a gray. So is that. So is that. They all work the same way. It's not a problem. I think it might be gray, actually. I can never remember if it's the Canadian or American spelling of gray. And because it's sitting on a dark background, let's just get rid of that so we don't have to worry about which spelling's right. I'm going to make the color of the text white. It's already bold, but I want to make sure that every browser makes it bold automatically, so I'll add the font weight of bold. And it's centered at the moment, and I would personally like it to be aligned to the left. So I'll set the text aligned to left. So if I go ahead and hit save and quickly just jump back to the browser and hit refresh, it's a nice dark gray, and my text is left aligned now. Now everything's kind of small and compact there. So let's go back up to the table and add in another line. Let's set the width to 400 pixels. And for all the TDs and the THs, let's give them a width of half. So we know at 400 pixels that it's 200. But we could always just write 50%, and we'll give the boxes a height as well of 60 pixels. Let's check that out and see how it looks. It's not too bad, and everything is centered by default. The vertical alignment of these are all centered. We might decide that for the TDs that we want the vertical alignment to be to the top. So if we refresh that, now they all align to the top there. We could go even further with our design. Just bump that up for you so you can see it. We could make that T foot. We could align it to the center. We could add the font style, make it italic, and make the color a little bit lighter. And if we hit refresh, it gets italicized and it becomes a lighter gray. Now if we want to go all out, we might decide that we want every other row to have a different color in the background so that it stands out. That's often referred to as zebra striping because if you think about it, it looks like the stripes on a zebra. So we would want the Nirvana row and the Radiohead row to all have a different background color. So the easy way to do that is to add a class, because as we saw in the previous module, a class can be used over and over again on a web page, and we can apply specific rules to a class that don't apply to every version of that particular thing. So if we come into the row for Nirvana and type in class equals odd, because it's the odd row, and that should actually be full quotes. And then for the row for Radiohead, we will do the same thing. Class equals odd. Now, if we look at our file and hit refresh, nothing has happened yet. I hit save, but all we did was assign a class. The class doesn't actually exist yet. So let's go back to our CSS and we'll write a rule for that class. So we put a dot for class, or a period, and then odd with the curly braces. We can say that the background color is yellow. When we hit save and refresh in the browser, only the rows that have yellow applied become, or have odd applied, become yellow. So we very quickly have created a very simple table that has a lot of design aesthetic applied to it. It's not the best looking thing in the world, I'm not going to lie, but we've applied a lot of very basic rules that can go a long way to making this look better. And everything that we've applied in the previous module to our text, we can also apply to a table, because a table is essentially made of text. We just have to decide how to target it, whether it's the whole row, the whole table, or just a simple TD or TH. So with those things in mind, carry those ideas forward to your table assignment for this week's module, and if you have any questions, as always, please get in touch.